Good morning, students. This is Dr. Greer, and I wanted to do a bit of a exam review. We're going to do chapters 1 to 10 and 11. That's what the exam is going to be on. So let's look at chapter 1. And you can see here how it's organized, the role of research, the history of healthcare, evidence-based bridge theory, evidence-based models, questions for patient care, where to find evidence to practice, developing clinical questions for real-world practice, publish abstracts, systematic reviews, and that's important that you understand what a systematic review is because it is what you will be doing. So as you look at the introduction, you want to understand that the reason you use research is to advance clinical practice. That's what this course is about, evidence-based practice research. So look at the title, Understanding Research for Evidence-Based Nursing Practice. So everything that we do is going to be centered around designing a study for nursing evidence-based practice. And if you look here, it talks about the types of questions that need to be asked when reviewing a study, like you did in your critique. What is the answer to the practice question? What did the authors conclude? What did they actually find? What types of patients did they use? How were those people studied? What was the method used? And why did they ask that question?
It's 10 o'clock.
Okay. Hope that helps you a little bit. So let's go to the next page. So the text focus on the healthcare professional's role in understanding, as I said, research and evidence-based practice. But look what comes after that. A process used to make clinical decisions and answer clinical questions. So your research that you're designing this semester has to answer nursing clinical research questions. Whoops, I didn't mean to hit that. And for some reason, I'm finding it hard to actually, there we go. Research utilization. So look at the bold words when you're studying, means the use of research in practice is the key. If we go to the next page, again, when you're studying, you really want to hone on the keywords in the course, like qualitative approaches, and that they are evidence-based. But in this course, the course designer, Dr. Heiler, wanted to focus on quantitative. Quantitative is, think of quantitative as number measures and qualitative as contextual measures or narrative measures, okay? So quantitative is numbers, things you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Qualitative are characteristics like blue, green, orange, things that can only be represented by text. The next part talks about evidence-based bridge theory, and that is bridging research to practice. Evidence-based models and what they do. And they show you a bridge to show that it's bridged. You need to really focus on understanding this grid, the Iowa model of evidence-based practice in quality care, and the schematic, how the problem focus are triggered, how knowledge focus are triggered. So study that. Here's the remainder of the Ottawa model of research. Evidence-based innovation, potential adoptions, practice, implementation, adoption, outcomes. Because when you come up at the end of the semester with your poster, you may want to include how your research, the systematic review that you have done, has actually used either the Iowa or the Ottawa model. Here's the global health model. Just different 6 essentials of evidence-based model: assess, ask, acquire, appraise, apply, and evaluate. And here it tells you how they go about doing that, okay? Okay, so EBP, evidence-based practice, is the term used to describe the process that healthcare professionals use to make clinical decisions and to answer clinical questions. This is the second time that sentence has been in the book, so you ought to know that there may be a question about it on the test, okay? Look at the core concepts of each chapter: when to seek evidence, when something occurs out of the ordinary, outcomes of care differ without clear reasons, and you need to develop a policy, procedure, or standard of care. This is when you are engaging in evidence-based practice and what triggers it. Again, here's another core concept. An effective clinical question for EBP includes a concern that someone has studied, focuses on a concern that can be measured or described. Measured would be quantitative, described perhaps qualitative, and is a concern that is relevant to your healthcare professional scope of practice. So everything we're doing this semester addresses clinical nursing practice. The question also addresses who, where, what, and when. And then it talks about the PICO. Okay, the PICO is who, what, when, or where. And I believe it gives us a table. It does. These tables are very important because the next step in developing your research is forming a PICO. What is the population, the intervention, the comparison, the outcome, and the time of data collection? You will present your PICO in your poster. The sources of evidence: what is the best? Research-based, reports of multiple research studies, individual randomized control trials, non-experimental clinical reports, nurses' experience, textbooks, and opinions. You will notice that we want to stay in the green area. What we use this semester in our systematic review must be in a journal of nursing. I will accept 1 or 2 non-nursing journals, but it must be a peer-reviewed healthcare journal, preferably nursing. So why research? It helps us to identify areas of interest. It helps us access reports. We read and understand the research reports like you did in your critique, and we see if we can find information that is useful in helping us to answer the question, and we decide to accept or to use what is found as a result of the research. Here's core concept 3. What is healthcare research? Healthcare research is the systemic gathering or systematic gathering of information to gain, expand, or validate knowledge about health and response to health problems. EBP uses research-based evidence to plan and implement quality. So you need to make sure that you're reviewing these core concepts. Knowledge is what is understood and recognized about a subject. If it's bold, you highlight what's behind it. The things that are in these tables are important. Sources to search for nursing research. You can bet there may be a question on the exam about what the sources are. More sources. And remember, take time to go to the library and use CINAHL, use those sources you've been taught. What is an abstract? An abstract is a summary of a condensed version of a research report. Highlight that. Publish abstract. What would you include? Conclude. Know what it is you can and cannot conclude just from the abstract. What is a systematic review? The product of the process is a systematic review of the research literature. Here, how should an abstract be used? So this is where you're going to find your questions in your core concepts, in your bolded terms, and it'll be really definitional and applied relative to what you're learning based on those things. The 5 research questions applied to the systematic review. Match those up. Okay. And then let's quickly go over number 2. And we'll skip to 10 and 11. The research process. Look at your terms. Make sure you understand those terms. Find those terms in your text. What do you believe? Again, the tables, research report section, the method section. Here's your definition. Problem or introduction describes the gap of knowledge to what will be addressed. Know that that's going to be on your exam. Methods describe the process of implementing the research study. Results summarizes the specific information gathered in the research subject. Conclusion describes, and they may not be in a single question, but they may be in multiple questions. There's the key right there. Your core concepts again reinforce the discussion about what is a conclusion and how it differs from other portions of the report. The core concept, the results section reports a summary of specific findings. Data are the information collected in a study. Data analysis pulls elements or information together to present a clear picture. but it does not interpret or describe. Understand those key things. What does it do? What does it not do? Okay? Again, the mean. Now, what a mean is, understand stats. So, know what descriptive results are, what inferential results are, what significance is, what a p-value is, what a multivariate indicates, what is the difference between qualitative, quantitative, mixed method. Here it is, qualitative method, quantitative method, mixed method. Know those terms. What is a logistic regression? Statistical procedure that allows us to look at relationships between more than two factors and test those relationships. So understand, I mean, you don't have to read it word for word. Look at the key terms. A sample is a smaller group or subset of a group of interest that's studied in a research. Core concept again. Procedures again. So they reiterate over and over the same things that they talk about to make sure that you're getting the point. What is the data analysis plan? What is the problem? How do you describe the problem? The problem section of a report describes a gap in knowledge that is addressed by the research study. Highlight it. What is a lit review? Focus summary of what has already been published regarding the question or problem. A theory is a written description of several factors that may relate to each other. Know the terms. Okay? If you go through and study like that, I'm certain that you're going to get this. What is a metasynthesis? What is a meta-analysis? Again, this is about the fourth time we've looked at what is a systematic review. Okay? So now I'm going to jump down to chapter 10, because chapter 10 helps us get the background and the research question. The who, the what, the when, the where. Didn't we see that in chapter 1? It is reinforcing that same information. A good research problem represents a knowledge gap that warrants filling and can be addressed through systematic study. Didn't we just hear that in chapter 2? Inductive knowledge, deductive knowledge. Understanding a theoretical framework versus a conceptual framework. What is the difference? A research purpose is a clear statement of factors that are going to be studied to shed knowledge of the research problem. Often the research purpose is also known as the specific aim or research objective. So understand how the terms are interchangeable. Go through the book, know what a peer review is and why that's important when you're doing your literature review. Again, know your figures and your tables. Know the difference between a directional and a non-directional hypothesis. What is a null and research hypothesis? Because you're going to be designing this for your project. linking the research review to the study. If you're reading all these chapters like you are supposed to, then you should be able to carry out your project to a huge degree already. Giving you guidelines on how to critically read the background section of a report. It asks the question, what do we know? So understand that. Okay, now I'm going to jump to chapter 11, the research process. And as I said, I think you're going to find all this stuff redundant as we go along, but it needs to be reinforced so that you learn it. Again, the core concepts are the process is not always linear. It may overlap. Define and describe that knowledge gap. We've already talked about that. Assumptions are ideas that are taken for granted or viewed as truth without conscious or explicit testing. Okay, so assumptions that may show up on your exam. Anything in bold will probably end up on your exam. Okay. Understanding how to interpret data. I don't want you to focus much on qualitative because we are not going to allow qualitative questions for your project. Understand how information from research is disseminated. Understand aggregated data. Again, this says in chapter 2 we discussed. Well, we went over chapter 2 and here it is again. So it's reinforcing what you've already learned in chapter 2. This is the guide for how you will do your systematic review. Similarities and differences between the research process and evidence-based practice. This one is the one we are doing. A question may occur about what are the differences. Published reports, what do you conclude? All right, that is what I wanted you to know for the exam. I hope this has been helpful.